Okay, I'm going to talk about schizoid personality disorder. Um, this is a very sensitive subject. So for those who like get triggered by very sensitive, very controversial issues like talking about mental health and things like that, this is your trigger warning. Um, so must admit, when I looked into this, I was talking to my son, um, and we believed it would come out as something very similar to schizophrenia. Um, I was surprised when I looked into this. Um, Learning about this was really rewarding, actually. I learnt a hell of a lot. Um, um, and what surprised me the most is how, although it is kind of linked to schizophrenia, it's not actually completely linked to schizophrenia. So yeah, uh, I mean, we expected it. I mean, me and my son, we talked about it before. We were expecting it to be, like this whole big, if you've got schizoid personality, you must have like schizophrenia type thing, because that's like exactly what it sounds like. Um, so yeah, I was quite surprised to find out that that was like not the case. Because people with schizophrenia, it is shortened. There's a lot of like shortened words, and it does get shortened down to skits. You're a bit skitsy. Schizoid. You can kind of imagine it being very kind of the same. So yeah, I'm going to start talking about it, and I'm going to start telling you what I found. Be interesting to know what you guys think about it. Um, so yeah, again, my brain doesn't retain information. Not like this, it doesn't. So I have to read from my notes. So it's why it takes me so long to put out videos like this, because not only do I have to find the information, I have to make sure that I understand the information and it's written down in a way that it's not just like copied straight out of, you know. So yeah, I take my notes from several different sites. I don't just go through one or two. I go through like several different like medical sites and psychiatry sites as well, because it all gives different information. Um, Sometimes the same information, just in a different order, which is weird. So yeah, it does take me a while to find a lot of information. So I do have to kind of read my notes to get anywhere. Otherwise, yeah, I can't do anything for me. Yeah. Anyway. Schizoid personality disorder. Um, People with this condition are very often described as being odd or very eccentric, especially in the medical condition, especially like in the medical world. It's really strange that people in the medical world are describing these people as odd or eccentric, and it is people in the medical world. It's like doctors, mental health specialists. They actually do describe them as odd or eccentric. And it's only because they have a practical way of thinking, not emotional. Okay, their beliefs, their thoughts, their everything they do, anything, you know, everything they have to do, all their situations that they get into, everything they do is all looked at in a very practical way with no emotion, which is why doctors, mental health specialists, psychiatrists, they think of them as odd or eccentric. I think it's a bit, I personally think that's a bit mean, you know, to say that. What do I know? You know, just me. I'm not a professional. You know, how dare I have any kind of opinion into what a professional calls these people. You know, how dare I, go against them? But I do think it's a bit mean calling them odd and eccentric just because they're very practical. But the fact they do it with no emotion, is, I suppose, a bit odd. But you can see it, but I don't personally think it's that professional for mental health specialists, psychiatrists and stuff to turn around and call somebody odd and eccentric. But that's just me, people with schizoid personality, they don't want relationships with other people. They find relationships to be intrusive and just a complication they don't want in their lives. It's just that simple. It's a complication they just do not want, and they actually find it to be a very intrusive thing for them. And it's purely because they just don't have a lot of strong emotions, whether it's, and we call, so whereas most people have these really strong connective emotions where they can be really happy, really sad, really have these really, really strong emotions and feelings and whatever else. They don't, people with schizoid personality, they don't get these really strong emotions, so that you don't feel really, really happy. They can't feel really sad. They're very kind of neutral, very neutral people. So when you're around them, they feel very kind of distant. There's no real warmth there. There's no, you can't get any kind of feeling out of them, any kind of connection. There's no emotional connection from them. With most people, you can build this, emotional connection with anybody. You can tell when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're feeling anxious, when they're feeling whatever. People get excited, people get nervous, there's this, with people with schizoid personality, there's just none of that. Now, I talk a lot with my hands. It's what I do, especially when I'm excited about something, nervous, or feeling really kind of uncomfortable, or any kind of really a strong emotion. I talk, my hands will go all over. It's in most of my videos, you've all probably noticed it. I talk a lot with my hands. It's just what I do. If I stop talking with my hands, if my hands are just like neutral and just like, and they just don't do anything, and something's off. I'm not feeling very kind of right. It's a sign that something's wrong with me. There's no emotion there, there's no connection there, I'm not feeling very kind of, there's no real emotion in me. And it does happen. where there are days where I just have no real emotion in me, where if my FND is playing up or I'm having a weird day, I lose the ability to have any real emotion. It's weird and it feels weird, you know. But these people live like that, you know, no emotion, no nothing, no strong connection, no to anything, and they're just like that. Just in neutral all the time. They can be described as like dull or boring, you know, especially by other people. They can really be seen as dull and boring to a lot of people. But the reality is they're very, very distant, but it's an emotional distance. There's just no emotion there to connect to. Which, you know, makes it very understandable that people with schizoid personality don't really experience any real pleasure throughout their lives. You know, they don't respond to praise, they don't respond to criticisms, and don't really respond to other people's emotions. You know, there's this, you know, so even if other people around them were like really super emotional, you know, whether it's a negative emotion or a positive emotion, they won't respond to it. They can be seen as very emotionally cold or detached, you know. And I know that there are days where I can appear like that, you know. And there are days where I can, you know. But people with schizoid always appear that way, you know, and they will generally, as a rule, prefer solo things. So they will choose to do things solo. They will choose hobbies, sport, you know, activities, hobbies, anything they can do or want to do will generally be a solo thing. You know, they won't generally, as a rule, choose to do group activities, hobbies that require, you know, being in groups or in crowds. You know, it's just not something they want. They don't go for that kind of environment. Again, one thing they did, the sites all made very clear, is that it's a mental health condition. Schizoid personality is a mental health condition and is not the same as schizophrenia. They all pointed that out. They all did. They all pointed out this exact same thing. It is not the same as schizophrenia, okay? And there are differences between them. And I found a few, but there are actually two main differences between the two. The one thing about schizophrenia and schizoid personalities is there are several differences between them, but there are two that are the two main differences between them are what that I found that was very kind of across the board, that were ones that stood out right across all the sites I found, you know, which made a lot more sense to me than all the rest of them. So there are massive differences between them. So we've got things like schizophrenia has a persistent psychosis and hallucinations, right? So schizoid personality does not. So schizophrenia, you've got psychosis and hallucinations. Schizoid personality doesn't have any of them. Okay. They have schizoid personality. They have this ability to think extremely clearly, and abstractly. So they don't think clearly. They have hallucinations and psychosis. And this side, they think clearly and abstractly. Not only that, but with schizoid personality, they speak clearly, and you can understand them. With schizophrenia, that is not always the case. With the psychosis and the hallucinations, you cannot always understand them. Okay, so alright. People with schizophrenia, before a diagnosis, will sometimes get a diagnosis of schizoid, but that's not always the case. Because it's similar, schizoid can be the first sign, but again, that doesn't always coincide either. See, whereas so this is where you kind of have to stay with me a minute, because this is where I kind of had to sort of move it along a bit, because there was this concept that there is a link between the two, but this is where it got a bit different, and this is where the difference lies between the two. With schizoid personality, it can be a first sign of schizophrenia, but that isn't always the case. Now, with schizoid personality, they found links to avoidant personality and paranoid personality, and also schizotypal personality. Okay, although they did say it's more likely to coexist with only a mental health, right, but only mental health specialists will diagnose these. Right, right, so you will these are the links with schizoid personality, okay? So we've got avoidant, paranoid and schizotypal personalities are all links to schizoid personality disorder. Now, the biggest difference between schizoid personality and schizophrenia, despite schizoid possibly being a first diagnosis before getting a diagnosis of schizophrenia, on the odd, it can happen, is that schizoid personality is not dangerous. It does not make you violent. So, so even if you get a diagnosis of schizoid personality and then get a diagnosis of schizophrenia, it doesn't always coincide. If you get a diagnosis of schizoid personality, it does not mean you'll automatically become schizophrenic. Because schizoid personality is not dangerous. There's nothing in it that makes you violent in any way, shape or form. Unless you have a co-occurring condition. So unless you have a co-occurring condition that is violent in its own right, schizoid personality is not dangerous. It's just not. So you can have a diagnosis of schizoid personality and then later on become schizophrenic. But you can also get schizoid personality and never become schizophrenic, because it doesn't just run. It's not a link to schizophrenia. It just isn't. It's a possibility or a probability that it might possibly be a first diagnosis before schizophrenia. They're just different. They are actually different conditions. You know, if somebody with schizoid personality becomes dangerous, it's because they will have a co-occurring condition. If somebody with schizoid personality ends up with psychosis and hallucinations, that's when you can guarantee a schizophrenic diagnosis. But they're not linked. It's not the same condition. There's no. It's just not a thing. You know. So I did find that interesting. You're more likely to have, if you have schizoid personality, you're more likely to have avoidant personality or a paranoid personality, you know, than you are schizophrenia. You know, so that is far more likely than the schizophrenic kind of condition, which I found really interesting, even if I got a bit kind of muddled up, you know, sometimes it. Yeah. Okay. What I am going to tell you is that, as a rule, schizoid personality is detected in early adulthood, but can be seen in children as a first sign. You know, it can. The first signs can be spotted in children because it is a chronic mental health condition. It's, you know, and because of how peculiar and detached the behaviours and thoughts are, it's you might kind of see the first signs of it in childhood, but it's generally not detected until early adulthood. And people with this condition don't generally feel motivated enough to actually get help for it, which I found kind of interesting, realistically, because it kind of reminded me of the narcissistic personality. I mean, the fact that both conditions, they just don't feel that interested in getting help. Although with narcissistic personality, they're too they feel too superior to get help. With this one, they just don't feel motivated to get help. They're not interested. It's like, yeah, I haven't got the energy to get help. You know, so I don't have the energy to get help. I'm not interested. Although, to be fair, when I did the avoidant personality, there was that lack of motivation to get help as well. So it all kind of links with the avoidant personality as well. So if they have an avoidant personality on top of a schizoid personality, you're really in trouble. But what I am going to do is I'm going to leave it here, and I'll start with things like the sign, like types, signs, symptoms, and things tomorrow, I think. Yeah, I'll do that, and I shall see you later. Bye.